The Supreme Court has a live streaming service showing what's happening in the courtrooms. So normally it's viewed around 20,000 times a month. Yesterday it broke all records with 4.4 million people tuning in.
The reason why they were watching the first day of the hearing into the decision to suspend Parliament in the run-up to Brexit. Let's go to outside the court now and speak to Raphael Hogarth from the Institute for Government, who's been watching proceedings. And for those who haven't watched closely yesterday, and I know there were lots of people watching online, just take us through the main arguments from yesterday briefly, if you would.
So what happened yesterday was that in the morning, the barrister for Gina Miller, who's challenging the prorogation through the English courts, put forward that side's main arguments. He said, first of all, that the Prime Minister's purpose in proroguing Parliament, suspending Parliament for 5 weeks, was to avoid parliamentary scrutiny, not, as he said, to bring in a new legislative agenda. Secondly, that was an improper purpose, so an unconstitutional purpose at law. And thirdly, he told the court that this was something that the court could rule on. This was something where there were sort of there were legal standards by which to judge whether what the government did was legitimate. And then in the afternoon, we heard from lawyers for the government who essentially tackled the fact, said actually a prorogation of 5 weeks isn't that extraordinary after all. It's happened before, it happened during the First World War, it happened during the Great Depression, and actually that there isn't very strong evidence for saying that the Prime Minister was motivated by an improper motive at all.
The judges are also looking at that other ruling from Scotland, aren't they, which ruled that it may well be illegal. So they're looking at two different rulings.
That's right. So this is a joint appeal from cases in the English and Scottish courts. So the English High Court said that this matter isn't justiciable at all. That means that the court essentially can't rule on whether the Prime Minister ought to have prorogued Parliament or not. The Scottish Court, by contrast, Scotland's highest civil court, the Inner House of the Court of Session, said not only that the prorogation is justiciable, but also that it was unlawful. And the reason the Scottish Court said that is because the Scottish Court said it was motivated by essentially the Prime Minister wanting to deprive Parliament of the constitutional role that the law affords to it, which is to be there to legislate and scrutinise the government's sort of main policy at a time like this one, where the government is acting against a ticking clock in the form of the Article 50 deadline.
Raphael, I understand that you are absolutely fascinated by all of this. Are you surprised? First of all, let's talk about, so many people watching online. I mean, the Supreme Court's never seen an interest like this, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember a case ever attracting this much interest, except maybe the original Article 50 litigation, the first case taken by Gina Miller to this court. But I think in a way it's not surprising because, we were all glued to this incredible constitutional confrontation between the government and the Parliament, chiefly over Brexit, which was taking place in the House of Commons across the square. Obviously, the House of Commons is now prorogued, but the confrontation is still going on. So it's moved across Parliament Square to the Supreme Court, and essentially the battle is still going on, but the theatre of battle has changed.
And we saw people outside on both sides as well, also engaging in protests and shouting at each other as well. I mean, that's set to continue, isn't it, I imagine?
Yes, I mean, I've certainly never seen the outside of the Supreme Court as lively and boisterous and with as much unusual fancy dress as it was yesterday. And yes, I imagine that some of that will continue today. I think it just reflects the sort of significance of the issues that the court is deciding this week, that it's attracting such sort of vigorous protest and discussion even on its doorstep.
And just really briefly, remind me when the judges actually rule on this.
We don't know. The earliest they might rule is the end of this week, very earliest Thursday night or maybe Friday. If they disagree or they need to deliberate or talk about it, then more likely that we get a decision sometime next week.
OK, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed, Raphael Hogarth, joining us from the Institute for Government. Thank you very much.